Jack Kerr said hemp can save the planet. It's the only thing that can save the planet. Well, it was impossible really for him at that point to quantify how that was going to happen, right? There was just, nobody was growing it. There wasn't enough knowledge. Today, people are growing it. There's a lot of knowledge. People are turning it into products. So if we're going to have a plan to save the planet, right, every plan has to be quantified. You have to, if you say we're going to make all car bodies.
Hey guys, it's Mandi with Global Hemp Association. I wanted to say thank you so much for joining. I'm excited about the opportunity to build a relationship and connect this supply chain. I mean, after all, that's why we started the association. Our association was built on the foundation of connecting supply chain, building relationships, and helping you grow your business. Anyone from farmers, manufacturers, and distributors, people that are passionate about the supply chain, and those creating products selling into biofuels, plastics, textiles, construction, and building materials. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining. When you do join, please drop in and say hello. Let Bruce and I know that you're here today. I'm excited about this conversation. It's a big buzz topic, Bruce. The topic of carbon sequestration and carbon neutral or carbon negative comes up all the time. So I'm excited to talk about your background and introduce you to all of our audience. So hello, everybody. I'm excited to have you. And Bruce, if you don't mind, give them an intro. Let us know where you're from, how you got into this. Which background?
Sure. It's Mandi. Yeah. My name is Bruce Dietzen, and I've been in the hemp space since about 2013. And it's all about this thing about carbon, et cetera. It's just so important. So I'm glad people are getting really excited about it. But I got involved in 2013. I decided to, I had been in the computer industry and the internet industry for all my career. And I was kind of like kicking back in Key West and deciding, what do I want to do when I grow up? And so like so many old guys, I decided, well, I've got to design my own sports car, right? That's kind of a standard issue thing. And so I did. And then once I got it close to where I wanted it to be, I read about what Henry Ford did back in 1941. And that's making a car using a lot of plant material, and some of it was hemp, and he ran it on hemp fuel. So I thought, well, what the heck? I can do that. So instead of using fiberglass, I was going to use fiberglass. I'd even made a couple of parts out of fiberglass. So that was kind of good because I could see, and compare the two. So I started making some more parts, of the body parts with hemp, and I found out it was a little bit lighter, which was interesting. It wasn't much more expensive, just slightly more expensive. And really the real cost in doing something crazy is not the materials, it's the labor time when you're doing small one-off type of projects. Right. But this, this is an example of, see if I got that right, of a bi-directional weave, a regular weave, just like your shirt. And that's what I used for the first couple of cars. And now I've moved on to using something that's a little bit stronger that I've been designing. So net, got the first car done, started to get a lot of attention, and ultimately was approached by Jay Leno's garage. And Jay offered, he said, I'll fly you out here. I'll, drive the, you can ship the car. We'll pay for the whole thing, et cetera. And we'll do a little show on that. And it was a weird show because their objective was out of the box. They called it out of the box. So these were all different cars that were insane ideas. And some of the other episodes during that series were had the weirdest cars you've ever seen. But somebody came up with the idea, wow, here's a guy who made a car out of cannabis. Far out. And so got the car out there. And Jay was just as cool as could be. Just a great experience driving around the car with him. And, he's used to these super powerful cars. And I said, well, the whole point here, Jay, is not power. It's not, it's not super horsepower and this sort of thing, supercar. It's to show that we can make stuff out of hemp. And he's going, okay, that's kind of interesting and this sort of stuff. So we talked a lot about it, and it turned out somebody started to spread the word about that video, and it's been seen, I think, over 50 million times. Yeah. So a lot of visibility. And so since then, I've just been experimenting with how to make better and better and stronger hemp biocomposites using bioepoxies, etc. So I'm always experimenting with more things like that. But that was the genesis that got me involved in hemp, and it all started with reading "The Emperor Wears No Clothes" and by Jack Kerr, because he was the one who documented the whole history of hemp, and that book has turned out to be the #1 best-selling book about hemp in history. And he went all the way back. This is all the way back in 1985 when he first published that book, and he was talking about global warming back then. Global warming, and he was approaching the U.S. government saying, "We've got a plan." Him and his assistants, "We've got a plan. We can save the world with this plant. We can make fuels. We can make cars. We can make, you go down the whole list, right?" And so it was interesting. They turned him down. They said, "You can't do that." It said, "It's a genius idea. You mean we don't have to use petroleum anymore?" Right. And he said, and we don't have to cut down trees anymore, cut down all these forests anymore. Right. I said, "Well, it's a genius idea." I think this is the head of the U.S. Energy Department or something like that. Yeah. It's at the end of chapter 2. If you get a copy of the book, it's a really interesting story. And so Jack's feeling really great about it, and apparently, from what he says in the book, and then the guy comes back and says, "There's only one problem." And Jack says, "Yeah." He says, "Well, did you know that cannabis hemp is illegal?" He says, "Of course. I've been studying this for 14 years. Of course I know it's illegal. I'm here to get you to consider hemp instead, And he says, "Well, we can't do this because it's illegal." And, the guy immediately just kind of backed away, etc. And Jack, said, "I'll send you all the research," send him a giant box full of research. Mm-hmm. The guy, they never opened it up. They send it back to him.
Oh,
this is,
really?
I think that happened. I don't think that story was in the first book. I think that actually happened and was in 1992. But then he added it on to a subsequent edition of the book, this story.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to see where we've come since that time frame. Since hemp has been legalized, etc. And so that's what led me to make the car initially. And then also to start up carbon negative fiber to develop advanced biocomposites. So, and I can show you a real quick prototype. It's seeing it on the big screen here, but this is multiple layers of unidirectional kind of pre-stressed hemp fiber, and we're getting different samples of different fiber from around the world, etc., and experimenting with those and finding out what the tensile strengths, compressive strengths are, all that kind of good stuff. But
can you talk about those a little bit? Like, I'm curious to share. Or I'm interested in how many of our listeners understand the value. Like, what is when I reach out and I start talking to people about, hey, we can make hemp cars and we can make auto body parts. And I've got this member and an advisor, Bruce, that's done it. And they say, well, what? Like, is it stronger? Is it lighter? Does it last longer? Can you speak to some of those benefits specifically?
Well, the main benefit is carbon. To bring up your you're mentioning carbon. Every material that is used to make anything has something called a carbon footprint or embodied carbon, and all that fancy term means is how much energy measured in terms of CO2 was required in order to make that product. So with hemp, it's a carbon negative material because hemp, like all plants, takes CO2 out of the atmosphere. That's what it uses for its structure, is the carbon part of CO2. Mm-hmm. It doesn't take it out of the soil. A lot of people think that trees are made out of soil. The trees and hemp and every other plant is made from CO2. That's the primary building block. So since it's taking the carbon out of the atmosphere, it's taking the CO2 out of the atmosphere, playing with it, breaking it up and using it, making sugars out of it, etc. Then if you take that plant material and you turn it into a durable good, right, then you're actually sequestering CO2. You're removing CO2 out of the atmosphere. So the more you do that, the better off the planet is. And so there's, getting back to your question about the performance, fiberglass is not a carbon negative material. It's a intensely carbon positive material, carbon intensive material. For every pound of fiberglass that's used, 8 pounds of CO2 gets dumped into the atmosphere. So that's pretty bad. Cement, it's a 1-to-1 ratio. Cement is one of the big things, one of the big problems that people are trying to address. Fiberglass, on the other hand, dumps 8 times more CO2 in the atmosphere because it requires a lot of fossil fuels to heat up the raw materials into glass, right? Which is then spewed out as a contiguous fiber. Carbon fiber is actually worse. For every pound that you use, it's 20 pounds of CO2 that are dumped into the atmosphere. So as human beings over the last 150 years, we've basically just moved along and figured out how to do things better and faster and cheaper and this sort of thing. It's been great for the advancement of society, for those that actually get to benefit. There's a lot of people that haven't obviously, but we've moved forward for the last 150 years without considering what the impact is from the ways we are doing things better, faster, cheaper. And now you see more and more of the world thinking, gosh, maybe we shouldn't be making stuff out of stuff that requires that fossil fuel stuff, right? And so instead, if we make things out of carbon negative materials, maybe it would be a different world. Yeah. So, and of course, the one thing about hemp, somebody could say, well, why don't you use potatoes or something like that, or apples or cherries, et cetera, or even wheat or corn stalks, et cetera. The thing about hemp is it's just so perfect. It's such a versatile plant. It's one of the strongest fibers in the world. And so you naturally want to use really, really strong fibers if you're going to replace things like fiberglass and carbon fiber. Hemp will never be as strong as carbon fiber. Carbon fiber is almost pure carbon. Hemp is 45% carbon. You can't change that. Where we're going to go with all of this, hopefully, as humanity, as a human society, is towards a carbon negative future, right? We simply have to go way beyond this concept of a net zero society. You see people talking about, we're going to be net zero by such and such date. That is so 2018. That is so passé. Any company out there say, we're going to be carbon neutral by 2050. Right. That's, I laugh when I hear that.
No reason we can't be carbon negative, not carbon neutral, right? But
right. And we have to do it right away, right? The IPCC says, and they said a year and a half ago, that we only have 10 years left before we might go over this tipping point, and then we can't control anything anymore. So not only do we not need to worry about being carbon neutral by 2050, it's total BS. We have to be carbon negative tomorrow. And so myself and yourself and others in the hemp industry are all singing this song. And so, yeah.
Okay, so Jeff
how do we get there?
Jeff has a good question. Wants to know when we're teaming up with James Doyle Longevity for hemp-fueled race car. And this is James's. James is passionate about this too. If anybody doesn't know James, look him up. He's an awesome 15-year-old that's got an incredible background, but a passion for the auto space and the auto industry.
Yeah, I would like to. He is a really entertaining and very bright young man, and his dad is a real cool guy too. And we've talked many times. For those of you that don't know James, he has interviewed just about anybody that's ever been anybody in the automobile racing industry. and it's just long hair, young kid, just quite
Extremely
energetic,
bright.
etc. Yeah, very
Yeah.
bright. And so,
Yeah.
hopefully, we will do something. There's a lot of people that have contacted me, said let's make a hemp supercar and this sort of stuff. A lot of people have grand plans. A lot of people don't necessarily follow up on it, but I suspect with James that will probably happen sometime in the future.
And he doesn't have the patience. That's one thing that that you see in the industry is there's a lot of talk about, well, it's going to take time. It's going to take time. And just like you said, we're running out of time. And so I like when I talk to him and he says, listen, I'm tired of hearing that it's going to take time. We have to fix it tomorrow. And so, yeah. So how do we get there, Bruce? How do we get to a carbon negative place?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Mandi. I am really glad you asked. One of the initiatives that I started here recently, which is kind of an altruistic thing. It really takes away my time spent developing these biocomposites, but it's something that I just feel very strongly about, and in fact, it's attracted a lot of other people that feel strongly about it, including yourself. Thank goodness, because you have helped to build our team very rapidly over this last month, and it's called Drawdown Hemp, and you can see the details at drawdownhemp.org. So the whole concept is right ever since 1985, when Jack Kerr said hemp can save the planet. It's the only thing that can save the planet. Well, it was impossible really for him at that point to quantify how that was going to happen, right? There was just, nobody was growing it. There wasn't enough knowledge. Today, people are growing it. There's a lot of knowledge. People are turning it into products. So if we're going to have a plan to save the planet, right, every plan has to be quantified. You have to, if you say we're going to make all car bodies out of hemp material in the future, or if we're going to, instead of using concrete and steel to make buildings, right? Both of those are carbon positive materials. Instead, we're going to use, say, things like hempcrete. And for the structure, we're going to use engineered timber, right? And lo and behold, it's possible. Right now, it's possible to make hempcrete buildings that are 40 stories tall, where the structure is actually held up by engineered timber, and the hempcrete is still just an insulating material. It's not what's holding it up. But if we're going to do these things, and we're going to convince the powers to be that we need to do these things on a big scale, we have to have the numbers behind it. We have to know what the difference is in cost. We have to be able to say, we need to be able to go to people like Elon Musk, right? Jeff Bezos, Warren Buffett, whoever, and all the political leaders around the world. We have to be able to go to them and say, here's the package. Here are the numbers. If we do this, if we start making all of our buildings out of hempcrete and engineered timber, etc., instead of using the concrete and the steel, it's going to take this much CO2 out of the atmosphere, and that's called carbon reduction, and that's what the X Prize is all about. They're only focused on carbon reduction. But then on top of that, it's also going to avoid a lot of CO2 being generated because we're not using all those fossil fuels to create the steel and the concrete.
Well, and I think that's the biggest piece to this that I just don't think is discussed very much, because carbon sequestration is such a buzzword right now, and carbon is a buzzword.
Yeah.
But understanding the difference in the footprint making those products compared to a hemp product is black and white. It's night and day difference.
Yeah. So that's what our team is about, and I think we're at 27 people, 28 as of this morning, and it's a lot of it again is thanks to you, so we're breaking up into different teams, focusing on these different solutions. I mentioned hempcrete. Another big one is going to be, I think, but we don't know until we run the numbers, is going to be biochar. I'm spending the whole afternoon. I'm going to do a Zoom session this whole afternoon. And anybody on the team, I think we got 8 people on biochar. that wants to pop in and start to add some more research, etc. We're trying to quantify this, get a handle on all of it, so that we're able to go out there and publish it to the president, seriously, to prime ministers, to city manager or city mayors, etc. Whoever wants to listen, right? And philanthropists. But the bottom line, that you have to have those numbers. You have to put it all together. You have to show how much it's going to sequester and how much it's going to avoid, and then what is the cost. Now, it might cost a whole lot of money to do something like this, but guess what the alternatives are, right? These giant machines like direct air capture, etc. It's going to cost money to make a whole bunch of those things too. So it's not just a function of, you say, all right, we're going to use hemp instead of fiberglass, and it costs almost the same. Some of these solutions like biochar, if we put biochar in every bit of cropland around the world, that's a pretty expensive proposition. But immediately, it would be sequestering CO2 right away, and also would probably be increasing the yield, reducing the amount of world hunger. So there's all sorts of co-benefits to doing this as well. And so we're looking at documenting and quantifying all of that as well. So it's a big task, but doggone it, somebody's got to do it. So we are. That's what our team's all about. Okay, so how do people get involved in the team? Tell me about the team. Tell me about the projects. Tell me about why did we pick Drawdown Hemp? Talk to me about this. Yeah, thanks. That's a perfect question. In 2014, there was an initiative that was started that was called Project Drawdown. And it was led by a gentleman by the name of Paul Hawken. And his idea was, I want to have all these various different teams out there around the world that have ideas about how to draw down CO2 out of the atmosphere. And he also was interested in carbon avoidance as well, by the way. But I guess the Drawdown name made sense. Anyway, this is in 2014. And guess what was still considered as dangerous as heroin in 2014? Hemp. Even the stalk of a hemp plant, right? Well, you can't have that. What if the kids get a hold of that stalk? Oh my God. So
I had someone just the other day say, well, there's no way we can grow hemp out here, as a commodity in our agricultural rotation crops. Because if our neighbors' cattle get into it, they'll be high. They'll all be stoned. And I was like, yeah, no. There's still so much education that has to happen. And it's still so funny to me. We joke about it. But reality is these conversations have to continue because there's still a lot of misinformation.
There is.
So anyways, go ahead.
So anyway, so back in 2014, way back in 2014, when they were doing this, they had 83 teams, and each one of those teams had their own idea about how to save the planet, right? And so they did exactly what we're doing right now. They went out and they did the research. They found out how much, just to give you an example, I think one of them was bamboo. Yeah, that's a good example. And it was like the 8th most important way or most effective way to help draw down CO2, which tells you something right away there, right? If bamboo is that important, there are 83 different solutions. And so each team had to go out there and quantify how much CO2 could be sequestered, how much could be avoided, what would be the cost to do that, what would be the green premium, as Bill Gates likes to call it. If it's that important, if it can make that much of a difference, if it costs a lot of money, then you got to get the government involved in this sort of stuff, et cetera, to help back it. So each one had their own presentation in the book. And so that when the book came out, I can't remember when that was. I think it might have been 2017 or 18. It in the back of it, it said "coming soon," coming attractions or something like that. Yeah. And they mentioned hemp, and they had like one page on hemp, which was great because they recognized that after a couple of years, they're going like, people must have been saying, hemp's pretty important, but it still wasn't, fully legalized. So they say, just stay tuned because you're going to learn more about hemp later on. Well, I don't think they've ever picked up the ball. And so that's what we decided to do. Pick up the ball at this point and do the same thing, quantify what hemp can do. And if bamboo was like the number 8, and hemp can make a whole lot more things than bamboo, right? It's just, I suspect what we're going to find at the end of the day, when we finish all of our studies, is that hemp is going to be one of the top 5, if not better, ways to reduce CO2 out of the atmosphere and to reduce the amount of CO2 being dumped into the atmosphere. And it's going to have a lot of side benefits too, right?
Yeah.
We can make a whole lot of stuff out of hemp, like houses and biocomposites, for the marine industry, for the aerospace industry, for automotive industry, for the sporting goods industry, all these things. And then at the same time, we're going to have a little bit of grain also grown as a result of this, right? Mm-hmm. So now we're start talking about, massively growing hemp in places around the country or around the world where bamboo can't be grown. It's a lot more of a versatile plant. And it also has a tendency to create these really fantastic grain seeds that can feed not only humans and potentially end world hunger, but also livestock as well. It's a tremendous source of, as you know, protein and omegas. So it's really pretty exciting.
It's okay. So talk to me challenges, right? When we talk about the carbon sequestration and the need to actually quantify it, what are some challenges we're running into, and what maybe should the industry be paying attention to, or our teams, when we talk about quantifying carbon, right? Or quantifying what we're working on.
What are the challenges? Mm-hmm. Is that your question? Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say right now, we have a wide open field and nothing really can stop us. That sounds kind of weird, but the impediments that we've had over the last, years, I guess, is that when people talk about carbon and saving the planet, people with big, corporations with big, deep pockets start to come up with these solutions, right? And they may be man-made machines and this sort of things, et cetera. They have big money, so they invest in some of these technologies, et cetera. And next thing you know, they've got their PR people putting out these press releases, et cetera. We've got this new technology, boom, 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 boom. And we're going to do this, and we're going to mine minerals and then spread them all over the ground. We're going to make direct air capture machines. And I don't want to slam any of these guys, but basically, what's one of the big problems with that is that it allows these fossil fuel companies to continue doing business the way they have done business, right? So if they make a big mess, but they say this is how we can clean it up, right? It's the old, I can't remember what that adage is, but create a problem and then come in and offer a solution, right? And that's what the fossil fuel industry has done. Yeah. So, and they get a lot of attention with these solutions that they're offering up, but the answer has been right there in front of us all along for thousands of years. Instead of making stuff that's out of stuff that's pulled from underneath the ground, or like minerals that are mined, or petroleum, you simply do what Henry Ford said. Don't rely on stuff from underneath the ground. Rely on stuff that you can grow above the ground, right? Yeah. Rely on crops. Make everything from crops. And this is not a radical new idea. This is something that has been advocated by people like Henry Ford, a long time ago. So now we're finally getting to the point where people could potentially take this seriously. And if our numbers prove out and we show that hemp can help sequester and avoid literally thousands of millions of tons So gigatons of CO2 per year at scale. Then that's going to make hemp paramount. I mean, it's
it's
the fact
game
that you
changing.
could use.
Yeah.
Pardon?
It's game changing.
It's game changing, and when it's finally recognized for its opportunity to help, it's going to be, oh my God, we can't live without it anymore. That's where it's going to be. So It's not just going to be occasionally people wearing hemp clothes or driving an occasional hemp car. It's going to be one of the best ways that we can save the planet, while simultaneously doing a couple of other things, some what we call co-benefits. One of those co-benefits is ending world hunger. That's huge, and hemp seed can be used right now by so many different industries. Right now, it can be adopted without a whole lot of changes, etc. You don't have to decorticate, hemp seed, right? It's pretty easy to start using it right away.
Yep.
So there's nothing that really can stop us once it's available, once it's approved for animal feed. It's already approved for human feed. So that's one of the benefits, is ending world hunger. The other one is changing the economies of poor countries, right? As you well know, if you grow hemp and you're not close to where it's going to be processed, and you have to ship it, across the pond, or 1,000 miles, from Wisconsin down to Florida, so I can play with it, and make cars. It's ridiculously expensive. You can't do that. Mm-hmm. So what's going to happen is the same thing that's happened with most other types of crops, is you're going to grow that crop where you're going to make those products. So let's say you're somewhere in the middle of Brazil, where they've burned down a lot of the rainforest, et cetera. And so now they need to, figure out what they're going to do. Well, now if they cultivate hemp, they, number one, can start to address the whole problem with deforestation, and they can use it to build their own homes, to build their own products. Everything from cardboard to the whole spiel. It has so many things that can be made out of this very versatile plant. So it's going to build new economies. It's going to feed the people that don't have enough food, and it's necessarily going to be that way. I mean, there's no one country or one state that's going to totally dominate all hemp and grow all the hemp for the entire world. Economically, it's just silly to think that would be the way things will go. It's going to be grown regionally and used and turned into products, and so poorer countries are going to be able to manufacture what they need, and they're going to manufacture their own food and their own clothing and their fuels, all this sort of stuff. It's very exciting to me.
Right. And then what it's doing to the additional crops that are being grown after it, right? That's another part. When we talk about disruption, is we're adding hemp has an opportunity, because of its root structure, to add to all of these existing crops. We're not coming in and just saying, let's take them all out necessarily, or while we do, we'll move slowly and still aid in the production of the other, corn and soybean and anything that's grown after it, for the most part. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah. If you would have asked me in 2014 if we should just grow hemp after hemp after hemp after hemp, absolutely got to do that. But now, I think we all learn we don't want to have monocropped anything around the world. It's crop rotations. It's all scientific about how to increase yields, et cetera. So at a bare minimum, growing hemp as a rotation crop is a great idea, especially now that, there's so much interest in regenerative farming, no-till farming, et cetera. That the root from a hemp plant can go down to something like 2 meters, right? Drilling down and providing nutrients to the life that's in the soil, and beautiful symbiotic relationship that's going on. It's a game changer, like you said. It's a total game changer.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, Bruce, how do people get in touch?
The easiest way is simply to go to drawdownhemp.org, drawdownhemp.org. And there's a little contact thing at the bottom, and that comes to me.
Awesome.
So shoot a message there, and if you want to be part of this team, that'd be great. And we need all hands on deck, and so it's going to be fun, I think.
And understanding that being part of the team is actually contributing to the research and contributing to the development of the industry, right? As much as it's fun to show up and chat, there's a lot of work that has to be done if we're going to quantify this, right? And so, go ahead.
Yes, absolutely. And thanks for bringing that up. Yeah. So it's interesting. I think some people jump on board with this idea right away. Some get a little bit hesitant, like, am I sharing my intellectual property? I'm a hemp entrepreneur. I've got this great new idea. Well, let me address that, right? When I talk to other people about the composite material that I'm developing, I don't give out all my IP,
Right.
but I do share what the overall market opportunities are, and with others that are doing similar stuff. And the same thing applies with anything that you're doing with hemp. Right now, we need to, if we want hemp to be successful, we need to at least get to the point where everybody in the industry wants to share the market opportunity data, right? And the data about how big of a contribution hemp can be to help draw down CO2 and avoid CO2. Those are the numbers as a community we have to put together. So we've got a meeting with the biochar folks later on today, and there's people that are looking at hemp biochar to do different things, right? But what we want to focus on is what's the biggest hit, right? And try to document that, and then find the next biggest hit, and that sort of try to document that. But nobody's going to be giving away trade secrets, but they are contributing market information and scientific study, etc. And then peer reviewing each other. That's a big part of it as well. For years, a lot of folks have run around and said, "Oh, hemp can do this, and hemp can do that, and it can sequester X amount of CO2, etc." Well, that's all fine and good, but it has to be documented and has to be agreed upon. So that's kind of what we're doing. Yeah.
Awesome. So there's lots of people that have come in. I want to say hello to everybody. Thank you so much for joining. Please drop a note if you're listening and haven't already made a comment. We'd love to say hello. For those of you that aren't aware of Global Hemp Association, I wanted to bring this up real quick, Bruce, because as we're talking about sharing information, I hear a lot of comments about this paradigm shift and the willingness to collaborate and bring information together. And understanding that the group, and especially Drawdown, is about creating a platform where we have resources. I think you called it an open source forum or platform for the knowledge or So talk a little bit about the shift and how we can continue to stay on this collaboration, because I think this is really what it's going to take in order to move the paradigm and really draw in the influence you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I love Global Hemp Association so much, right?
Well, thank you.
Because you've done an outstanding job in a very short period of time of engaging people, because you're providing a value to folks and an opportunity to network much easier. In some ways, COVID has actually done a few things that benefited society here, and that is the ability to communicate and collaborate a lot easier, because now everybody knows how to use Zoom. Mm-hmm. So you've used that very, very effectively. And I came out of the computer and internet industry back in the early days when we developed things like texting, right? Yes. It was called chat back then. So
when you had to wait for the dial-up. Beep, 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 beep.
Yeah, and so I have a special appreciation for this whole concept of eyeballs, That's what we used to call it. How many eyeballs are watching? How many people are showing up on your website and this sort of thing. And so, but I came from a different generation than you. Back in my day, if you wanted to go out and make something happen, you had to wear a 3-piece suit, wingtip shoes, right? Thank God that's over. But and then you met people one-on-one, or you brought them out to lunch and this sort of stuff, etc. So now, with the younger generation, which is you, embracing this type of technology to pull people together where they can actually start to make things happen a lot faster, it's just explosive, and it's just huge. So Drawdown Hemp is very similar in that same way, that we're really a community. We're a very small one. We don't want to be huge. We want to get people in our community that want to help put all this data together so we can use it to get the attention of the world leaders. But yours is much wider, right? You have much wider base of interest, etc. So, but
I think there's
my hat's off to what you've done.
Well, thank you. There's still this big shift in kind of what you spoke about earlier. People coming in and afraid of sharing their IP and afraid to share their research or their numbers. And now we've seen this understanding that in order to go to the next level and bring in that audience, it is a matter of collaboration and understanding we've got support. We're on a team. We're not out there to do this all by ourselves. We can't do it by ourselves. It didn't disappear or was not banned overnight by one country. It was everybody. And so it's really bringing it back to surface. So go ahead. Were you going to say something?
Well, I was going to say, plus there's urgency.
Yes.
Right. Getting back to that whole thing, we literally have maybe only 9 years left. And if it's true, and the IPCC is right, and climate change hits a tipping point of no return, is the way they describe it, and we're losing so much of the Arctic and the Antarctic ice, etc., that it's just going to change, the patterns of how the Gulf streams and this sort of thing, and then it's just there's no way we can fix it. So that's the other part of this is the urgency, and so we have to bring forth the most effective ways to reduce the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere that humans can think of. And if we and I'm already pretty well convinced that hemp is going to be one of those top things. So that's kind of a cool thing that's going on simultaneously with the advent of just, wow, we can do that with hemp, or we can do this with hemp. Yeah, well, let's do it all, and let's do it really fast because we're running out of time.
So I want to hear, out of all the projects that you see being made out of hemp, where do you see the most carbon being sequestered, and what excites you the most? I'm assuming the automotive space, but out of maybe the engine, because I'm taken back, and I have to give a shout out to the people that attend our meetings, both the Helmstead Biochar, the Drawdown, and the GHA meetings, right? The ingenuitive minds and the creativity and the forward thinking that out of the box thinking, it takes me back. It's so exciting. So what I thought I was passionate about and what I was excited about, turns out it's really unrelated to what is actually exciting me because of the people I've been around. So I'm curious from you, outside of what you knew and what you're seeing now, are they still in line? Is it still the same excitement for the same products?
When I first started playing around with hemp biocomposites, I really didn't have a theory in my head that this would be really, really, really big. The more I look at it, the bigger it looks. But the bottom line is, getting back to Project Drawdown, they had these 83 teams kind of do the same methodologies in measuring the different things that could be done, anywhere from reforestation to to using bamboo to changing the refrigerants in air conditioners, etc. They're disparate types of solutions, but they all pretty much follow the same sort of thing. At the end of the day, what Paul Hawken did and his team is they took a look at all of those studies and they stack ranked them and say, wow, this one's pretty high up there, right? This can make a big impact. So that's exactly what we're doing too. And I think we're going to discover some surprises along the way. I'll give you an example. When we first started to do this, I did some analysis on hempcrete. I just assumed, okay, if all homes are made out of hempcrete in the future, that's got to be the best way to save the planet. Well, when I added it all up and looked at all the buildings that are going to be made, every year after year after year, it's not enough to sequester a gigaton per year, and that's kind of the criteria that the X Prize is looking for. They want to be able to see that you've got a technology that can sock away a gigaton of CO2 per year, and that is a lot. Mm-hmm. So that's what also convinced me that anybody that's going to be trying to pursue the X Prize with hemp and they're only using one hemp solution, that's not going to cut it. You have to have multiple hemp solutions in order to reach that 1 gigaton. So we might get 100 million tons of CO2 from building a lot of hempcrete buildings in the future. We might get a lot from biochar. We've got some guys like Carl on the team, and he's found studies that show that just adding a couple percent of the volume into concrete, he can sequester a lot of CO2 while also increasing the performance of the concrete as well, so you have less of it. So we start to add up this sort of stuff. We start to add up how much biochar can be put into croplands, etc. Going forward. That could be a big number. It could be really expensive, but we got to find out what that number is and what the benefit is, and then we're just going to march down the line. We're going to try to focus on the places where there are some big hits.
Awesome.
I could rattle off a few more, but we're going to look at them and we're going to try to focus on the ones that we think have big opportunity first.
Sure. Hemp batteries excite me, and replacing the steel going in for the structural piece of this is exciting, and it's still so new. But yeah, I'm very, very excited about the opportunities around hemp compared to lithium.
Yeah, and I haven't studied that in depth, but that's on our list. Absolutely. Even the possibility of storing energy inside of our buildings, in the walls. That's something that, again, Carl Martel is looking into, and he's experimenting with that. So there's a lot of room for innovation, and what's cool is every idea that comes in, we can start to quantify its benefits as we go along, etc. And let me just mention about the X Prize itself, right?
Yeah.
For those that aren't familiar with it, Elon Musk offered up $100 million, right, to whichever teams can figure out the technology that would be best for reducing the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. So it's called a carbon reduction contest, and he executed it on the X Prize platform, which is a great organization. And the first prize winner would get $50 million, and then the runners up would split, $50 million. Some student teams would get some. All they're focused on is trying to find just a carbon reduction technology, which is great. It's a scientific way that things should be done. Get your scope of work well defined, and then execute it. So they're not interested in carbon avoidance. Of course, we are. We know that we can avoid a lot of carbon, us hemp people. So we're looking at both, quite frankly, and we're even looking at the co-benefits, et cetera. Mm-hmm. So it was in April when he announced this contest. And so when I was looking at it, I'm going like, that just might be the impetus that we need as an industry, a hemp industry, to pull it together and pursue this opportunity. $50 million is nothing to sneeze at. And so if we win this contest, I could see that those monies could potentially be put towards advancing innovation in the world of hemp and how it's used to reduce CO2. But if we don't, it doesn't make any difference because we're still on the same mission that we were all on before. But now we've got visibility, right? We will have gotten in front of some really heavy hitter, important people that can go, wow, I didn't know that hemp was that powerful, that it could do that sort of stuff. You showed us the numbers, you showed us examples, and so it's a beautiful thing. It's whether we win it or we don't is not the only measure of success here.
Right. Well, and we were talking about really looping in those influential people, and everybody knows Elon's name. Everyone knows the Musk Foundations, right? Or where
Sure.
he's involved. And so I think it is.
Yep.
It's bringing the knowledge to the powers that be. And unfortunately, the industry needs a capital injection in order to increase processing. I know Daryl said something just now. With the focus of regional processing facilities and spinning mills, most mills have vanished from the United States. And in order to retool or recreate that piece, capital has to come in, right? Phil had a really good question here. I think I lost you for a second, Bruce, but thinking about the focus on the big data is valuable. Sometimes, or some of us need to focus on lower hanging fruit that's right in front of us and align with our calling. Any thoughts on local underdeveloped hemp industries? I think that Daryl just said it really well. The spinning mills are definitely something that we need to put attention to. So it's great. Jeff, thank you very much for joining us again. Mac, I'm really glad to see you. You're welcome to attend anytime. When you were talking earlier about the California farm, I can definitely help connect you and get you started. Especially understanding that as you're farming, reaching out and finding your contracts first so that we know what we're growing for. The genetics really determine what industry or what market the product will potentially go into. But I think I lost Bruce. I hope that he still has Wi-Fi service, or I'm not sure where he's at. But I really want to thank everybody for joining. For those of you that are new or haven't been on before, please log on to globalhempassociation.org. Under our events tab, there's all sorts of different events that we're hosting, from R&D, technology discussions, biofuels, biochar, textiles, construction building materials, and more. Yesterday, we had an awesome networking meeting. There were about 45 people that were on. Jeff, it was good to see you on there as well. I hope that you were able to meet some good people. But you guys are welcome to join. We're a membership-based organization. I'd love your subscription. Donations are what keep us going, and our memberships are what keep us going and keep connecting you guys. So I invite you guys to attend whenever you'd like or whenever you can. You're welcome, Phil. I'm excited to have you on board. Thank you very much. I'm super excited to be streaming live on LinkedIn. For those of you that haven't watched or haven't tuned in before, please do so. We stream live every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So welcome back, Bruce.
How did that work out? Did you get a commercial in that short break? I don't know what happened to my computer. It just went blank. You know, yeah. It was just stupid. Oh, okay.
Well,
everything's plugged in. Okay.
Weird. Well, that's the internet. It's what we get for talking about this, right?
Yep, that's right.
Understanding the industry a little bit and understanding the competition, right? Steel and plastic and the concrete industry, paper, textiles, or cotton. Where do you see hiccups on the, I don't know if it's political necessarily, but when we start bumping into or up against some of these markets, do you think that we're going to see pushback from the steel industry and from cotton industry, these verticals that are heavy in carbon emittance?
Well, absolutely. Yes. You know, we are humans. We don't like to change. We like to do things that we're comfortable with. And unfortunately, we also like to do it the fastest, cheapest way. And that's what got us into trouble. I mean, take steel as an example. I mean, the cost of steel is nothing. I mean, it's like pennies for, I can't remember what measurement it is, but I've got it on a spreadsheet somewhere. If you want to replace steel with natural fibers like hemp or flax or what have you, it's going to cost you a whole lot more. That's one of the things that slows us down. And so that's why we really have to do what we're doing right now, and that's to quantify it and then make sure it's understood why it has value. But there's people that make steel that don't want to stop making steel. And so I remember I was watching an interesting podcast with steel makers a while back, and they were all saying, well, it's we know it's a problem. We're having to use a lot of these fossil fuels, but we're going to switch over to totally green hydrogen by 2050. And this is like 4 or 5 of them in the same thing. And so it was, okay, great. We've got a plan. Okay. And all of them will probably be retired by 2050, number one, that were in that meeting. And number two is it's still, their strategy just didn't even embrace the concept of going carbon negative. They're going like, yeah, well, maybe we can stop doing bad things to the environment in the next 30 years. Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. We'll do that. But the bottom line is, it's going to take the leadership of all the countries, and the financial industry, et cetera. I think it's kind of wonderful to see that the financial industry is talking about stranded assets. How much more money are they going to lend to these industries that are destroying the planet, right? How many more coal-fired energy plants are going to be built? I don't think there's going to be a lot of those anymore. Right. Right. But on the other hand, when these banks, when the big banksters start to take a look at the numbers and what the opportunities are, right? If you start making things that are carbon negative, then the money's going to start flowing into those industries and they're going to be more competitive, right? Yes. So that's the future. There is no future in destroying the planet. There is a future in saving the planet.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's real, right? We are seeing the effects of the way we've treated our planet. And I think that that's something that our generations before us haven't felt those effects like we are now. And like our children are. They're really our saving grace when it comes to implementation of what we're outlining, right?
Yeah. You got a couple kids, right?
Yeah.
You have kids? Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember one of your meetings, you were talking about that. You got a couple kids and this sort of stuff. So you have a future to protect for those kids. I don't have any kids. So, I don't know what my skin in the game is in this sort of thing. So, but it gets me out of bed in the morning doing this. So
yes,
it's worthy. So,
well, I say all the time is if we can pave the way, they'll change the world with it. They are smart. They're motivated. They see the effects of the plastic crawling up in their backyard or in their food or in their diets or, the carbon, and they feel these hot summers. We eventually will pass on. They are really going to be stuck with the aftermath. And so, yes, I love that it's much more consumer driven. It's exciting. It's a paradigm shift, and we have an opportunity to make a change. Daryl's comment just earlier that, MJ is pushing against us. Alcohol is pushing back against us. Tobacco and cotton are pushing back against us. Pharmaceuticals are pushing back against us. We have to be as tough as hemp. And that's exactly right. We have to be consistent and steady in our message and tough, like the fibers. And so thank you very much, Daryl. That was a great comment. Bruce, is there anything that we can do to help support you? What can we do to really support Drawdown and support your mission and get you back to really building sports cars?
I think the main thing is if you're interested in being part of the effort, right, to document and quantify what hemp can do to help save the planet, then reach out by visiting drawdownhemp.org and send me a message there at the contact thing at the bottom.
Yes.
That's the main thing. That's the main thing. We do need people to actually spend the time and do the research and do the quantification.
Yeah. So shout out to those who have that, or who have accredited research that we can use, and or validated research.
Right. So you might be in the academia world, right? And you're looking and you're doing some study. I think you had a couple of young folks on yesterday. I watched that, or the day before. I'm not sure, but you may want to work towards your dissertation, right? And use hemp. Why is this thing going?
Oh no, we lost him again. Right as we start talking. Well, we're at an hour anyway, so I want to say goodbye to everybody. Thank you so much for joining today. Please share these, invite people to join. We go live every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, so we will be back tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. to discuss another awesome topic all around hemp. So thank you very much, and we'll see you guys next time.